Hello and welcome to Voices of Leadership. Throughout history, technology has changed how we work. We've seen it with computers, email, automation, and countless other innovations. But AI feels different, not just because of the technology itself, but because of the speed of change and the impact that it could have on every role, every team, and every organization. One statistic from BCG really brings this to life. In their work with hundreds of organizations, they have shared that only about 30% of AI's value comes from the technology itself. The other 70% comes from rethinking how people work, collaborate, learn, and lead. In other words, AI transformation is ultimately a people transformation. And that's where many leaders find themselves today. They're trying to understand how to help people adapt while driving or continuing to drive performance. Before we get started, I'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat, share your role, and let us know what questions you have about AI, leadership, or the future of work. Hi, I'm Kathy Eastwood. Today's guest is someone who has spent her career helping organizations navigate change, build strong cultures, and prepare leaders and employees for what's next. AnneMarie Glebinski is an HR executive, future of work strategist, and trusted advisor, helping organizations design work for the human and machine era. What I appreciate most about AnneMarie is that while many people focus on the technology, which she spends a lot of time, has a ton of knowledge on, she's consistently focusing on the people because technology alone will not deliver results. People do. AnneMarie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I'm really thrilled. And just for everybody's knowledge, I'm an enterprise-wide talent leader. I've been in human resources almost 20 years, working between the financial services and the tech industry. I've held a lot of senior HR business partner roles, focusing on business strategy with executive leadership, and also more recently had a global enterprise-wide talent role. And as you know very well, I'm incredibly passionate about the future of work, especially the design aspects, and I'm very excited to dig in on that today.
Excellent. And I see a bunch of people joining. We've got folks from New York City. That's my hometown. Hello.
Right.
We've got Mexico. So this is going to be a great conversation.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Okay. So, Emery, I mentioned a lot about AI, how it's changing, work. When you think about the organizations that they're focused on AI strategies and governance and implementation plans, let's just start first of all. What conversations do you think they're not having?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've had the benefit over the last 6 months or so speaking to well over 100 different folks, big tech, AI startups, and I have a really great network of executive leadership, CPOs, talent leaders. So I've had the pleasure of having many of these conversations. And what's incredibly interesting to me is, broadly, I'd say, is there's a lot of focus on tools. So the big question is, what tools would you recommend for talent? What tools would you use to implement a talent review strategy? If you're lucky, you might have some organizations that say, well, we've thought through an AI roadmap. Our executive leadership is focused on AI. But if you dig in and you ask more questions about how this is connected down to the people, that's really where it starts to unravel. The focus on tools, the focus on long-term tool adoption. It's almost like purchasing a car for someone. If they don't know how to drive, they're not going to get anywhere. And so really what we need to start talking about in the now is we need to start talking about adoption, AI fluency. I mean, these are the things that are going to get the best benefit out of AI usage. But more than that, what we really need to talk about is the redesign of work. And when we start talking about tools and tools alone, what we're not thinking about are what is the work that is uniquely human, that only the human can do? What is the work that could be human plus machine, augmented by the new technology, and what work should just simply be automated. And if we're not thinking at that level intentionally about the design of the work activity, it's truly hard to really communicate properly in your organizations, get that adoption, and help grow talent in different ways to ultimately reach your business strategy. And that's really what it's all about. So I could probably talk about that for an hour alone, but there you go. An answer
Well,
to your first question.
it's perfect, and we're going to keep digging into it. But I mean, it's funny because you mentioned it in the beginning. Like a lot of people just assume we're going to adopt AI, and that is a strategy alone.
Yeah.
And what's your response to someone say, "Oh, we're going to use AI"? Is that enough?
No. So really, as an HR professional, one of the things I'd say, business leader first, HR partner second. It's all about the business strategy. So the first thing I would challenge somebody who's saying that in a leadership position in a company is, what are your long-term business goals? Okay, what does 2030 look like and beyond? What capability do you need to get there? How is AI fitting into that story? That's really the question that you need to ask. You think about the work activity, the skills required to address the work activity. And again, think about it like, what skills should be uniquely human, what could be augmented, what could be automated. So if you're just asking the question, we want to adopt AI, we're going to add AI, I would say, well, how is it going to add value? At the end of the day, we want this to add value. We don't want it to be used for the sake of it. And we have so many examples of that. I mean, most recently, I think it was Meta in the news just took their leaderboard down. They were trying to advertise the top 200 people that use the most tokens for AI, and they found that people were juking the system and using it just to use it. They weren't getting the value out of it. So I would say, go to your business strategy, think of the capabilities needed, and how are you going to get that value to hit your KPIs, hit your goals.
Yeah. And I mean, it really, when we think about this implementation, this change, because it is a massive change,
Massive.
right? We're going through.
Yeah.
And we haven't, I mean, change is not new for organizations,
No, no.
right? We've been automating processes for some time, we've been introducing technology. But when you think about this change that we're introducing now, how do you think about why it is so much different? Like you talked about a lot of, thinking about the future of work,
Yeah.
but, you know, the comp plans has to be different, right? Rewards. Like, how do you think about redesigning,
Yeah.
not just HR? And I think this is an important point that I want to talk about because I think a lot of people think, oh, HR, head of HR, what are you doing to improve the processes of HR? But you really have to be helping rethink how everyone comes to work in
Yeah.
its entirety.
It's true. So Hydrick and Struggles, I think it was earlier in this year, put out an interesting report on what CEOs expect out of their CPOs going forward. I spoke with quite a few CPOs in my network who joked, oh my God, this wasn't on my bingo card this year. Because quite frankly, what they were saying is that largely CEOs are expecting CPOs to drive AI transformation. Now, to your point on change is not new. I'm a certified change practitioner. I love the science of change, but quite frankly, what is so different right now is that this radical, new, highly disruptive technology is coming with no playbook. Even Hydrick and Struggles had actually acknowledged there's no true education to back up these CPOs for how they could envision the future. So I think that's what makes this time so incredibly unusual. And because I've had the genuinely wonderful opportunity to work 6 years in tech and have access to AI scientists, researchers, specialists, I've had the ability to understand that there's so many unknown unknowns. Right? So you need to have leadership and executive leadership, not just thinking about change the way they always would, but they actually need to be innovative and brave, because the redesign of the future of work is going to come with things we haven't imagined before. And that's why I'm so excited about this conversation today, because I feel that all of us have a huge responsibility to challenge each other, to ask some difficult questions. I have spent this entire year so far working so hard to research and have these difficult questions to further a point of view that I have on the redesign of the future of work. We all know that agentic AI or agents, right? These portions of the technology are going to really become significant over the next few years. The company G2 put out a study towards the end of last year that said over the next 5 years, agents are going to be leading the charge. Now, if you look at a job, if you look at a job description, it's comprised of tasks. Agents take over tasks, right? So depending on the number of agents and the way in which they're set up, when you look at a job, the job could all of a sudden look lopsided because now the agent is taking over portions of that job. If you look at your job family, right? So a job family is a composition of many different jobs. All of a sudden your job family could look lopsided. So this is why I say it's different now for executive leadership. It's different now when you're thinking about change. You all of a sudden have a job family that could be hugely lopsided. What does that mean for how we get the work done? Does it mean that work is now going to be a bit more agile? I spoke earlier this year at the Harvard Club in New York City at an executive talent summit. And one of the things that I talked about is that there's this common phrase, the right people in the right role at the right time. Based on all my research, I really think it's going to be the right people, the right work at the right time. Work may very well become more agile. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the future of performance? How do we incentivize people and motivate them to perform? What does performance look like? Uniquely human. What does it look like human plus machine? How do we measure the value? And then how do we measure machine outputs? What do the workflows look like? This is, again, the design of work. Where does the human stop and then the trade-off to the machine begin? How do we have clarity on that to get the right outcomes? And then you mentioned it, but compensation, I mean, the reward aspects. Think about it. If you have a role, and now it's lopsided because agentic AI or agents is, truly taking up tasks within that role. Well, how do you start paying a salary? What does variable compensation look like? I've had the privilege to have these very tough conversations with different executive leaders, people at really incredible consulting firms. And here's the beauty of this time. Nobody knows what they're doing. Listen, even at big tech, I will not name names. Big tech, everybody knows all the big tech names. Nobody really knows what they're doing. What's the beauty of that? Well, it is an opportunity to build and design and be creative and be innovative, in addition to being brave. We can really think differently about how we can add value. But again, this is why it's important to have these conversations. I had the pleasure of getting some answers and some ideas on some of these questions, but we're still reimagining it even today.
Yeah. And I think this is so important for our audience. There's so many different levels of maturity for folks of where they are in this transition, right? Some are getting used to the idea that we have the tech coming in. People are leading through and managing the fear, the egos, the uncertainty and doubt that exists there. But I think you bring up such an important point, and I want to make sure we challenge our organization or our audience here to really think beyond just the technology. This truly is a redesign, an opportunity to do all that. But I do want to transition a little bit here, AnneMarie, because we have to bring the people along. Right. So we said that quote where 70% of the value will come from the people. So you have said, where does the human fit into all of this? The humans aren't going away.
No.
Right. And the humans are still going to, and I think the humans are going to be even more important in this and the skills they bring to it. So what are some of the fears, the as people are adapting, what are you seeing as the fears, the concerns, the misconceptions
Yeah.
as people are rolling out AI and different ways of the future of work?
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say that has been fascinating to me is like the sensationalism in the news. Like I said, I had the benefit of having 6 years in tech and having access to these AI experts, like 30 plus year AI experts. And so if I saw anything in the news, I could like run down the hall or make a phone call and ask a question. And I think not everybody has that opportunity. So you could hear in the news something pretty controversial, like AI is sentient, and it can start to create a sense of fear or concern or confusion about leveraging technology or thinking differently about technology. And so I think one of the first things I'd say is to try to be as informed as possible, to read and to understand the technology, how it works, and how the tool actually provides information or does analysis. So that's one of the things I'd say. The other thing I would say is because there's so many unknown unknowns, even at the executive level, even at the organizational level, I mean, it permeates down to the leaders, it permeates down to employees. So people, without understanding how companies are going to leverage the technology, there's concern for where do I fit in? Is my role going to go away? Will I not have a job? And these are very valid concerns. And leaders have to lead through all of these challenges. How do I motivate and inspire my employees to embrace this technology when I don't even know what it's going to look like in the next year or in the next few years? Because the leaders themselves have the same fears. So or they have the same concerns. So again, it comes back to how do you motivate and inspire? And I think, you know, there's so many things that could be said, but one of the medicines or the recipes for fear and uncertainty and ego and all of that, I would say, is being as transparent as you can as an organization, being as transparent as you can as a leader. This is actually why I keep going back to workforce design, because if you take the time and the effort to be intentional, to do the analysis, it gives you information, it gives you data. You may not have a perfect plan, but it gives you enough to be able to articulate, like, hey, this financial analyst role, 20% of the reporting capabilities will be automated, but we have plans for this role to now start being a bit more advisory. So you can be a little bit more high level, but that bit of information helps bring people along. It helps build more of a sense of trust. When people feel a sense of trust, when they're not feeling that sense of fear, you're getting the best out of them with performance. And then from a business standpoint, because of course organizations are all about business and hitting the KPIs and meeting their strategy, when you do this workforce design, having that information allows you to think more intentionally about your investments. And it's not just your technology investments, it's also your investment in your people. How can you think through about redeployment of talent, upskilling and training? Again, you'll be able to communicate that more in the organization, and it'll help a bit with the fear and the uncertainty and all of those things.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm very passionate about leadership, right? And leading through change. And the biggest challenge I think at this point, you said it, is around clarity. And the leaders and the individual, no one really has clarity, but leaders have to be strong. They have to be courageous, curious, and be willing to have the difficult conversations with people, right? Because
It's
unless
true.
you
It's true.
express the envision, hey, we are going to redefine the work, and that may be all that vision is we need to redefine, we need to adjust because we need to stay competitive, right? That is enough to get started. But if people just put their heads down and hope that it's all going to happen, we're not going to be able to move the people along. We're not going to drive the change that we really need.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Um, you know, I think what I would say is one of the most important things that you can do as a leader, and it doesn't matter if you're a lower level leader, or if you're leading yourself, or you're executive level leader. It is so important to be vulnerable This is a core belief that I have and how I choose to lead vulnerable leadership. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Telling people, well, I don't know. There's a sense of power in that. Remember, I started off by saying nobody knows what they're doing. I have incredible confidence in that. I've had well over 100 conversations across multiple companies, across many different industries that has informed that confidence. Not all leaders may have done that. And so there could very easily be a sense of insecurity. I'm the leader, I should know, I should be able to tell my team. This is a very uncertain, unusual time. I think the best thing you can say is, I don't know, we're going to figure this out together. That in itself creates a sense of trust. I think making those attempts and those actions, especially during this time, is important. And when you talk about bringing people along on the journey, when we think of the science of change, I mean, it is classical. Have people come in and help you reimagine or think or help you design. When they're part of the solution, not only to quell fear, but actually you're helping to get them to adopt and become an advocate and an ambassador of the change. And of course, we certainly all want that.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story, Anne-Marie, like years ago, we were doing automation and it was for contract operations. We had teams across the globe and we knew we had to automate all of the roles, what they were doing. I brought them all into a room together for a week and said,
Mm,
okay, you could use this automation and these tools. How would you love to see it happen? How would you love to reimagine your job, your role? They were part of it. To your point, they
yeah.
helped automate the entire process. They helped implement every single change, and they helped find themselves new jobs, new roles on doing higher value work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about. I mean, that's leadership, is bringing people in and helping them with their fear and uncertainty. So I want to go to a couple of questions here. So we have Jamie's been asking, now, have you seen employees think about their employees' concerns and fears and implement retraining and helping them along in that journey?
I love this question. I actually was thinking, quite a bit about the individual employee very recently because, in the enterprise way that I have worked over the last several years, I'm always thinking about the organization and the business strategy and the bigger picture. But all the way down to the employee level, what I would say is you also are empowered to have the same philosophy. So, first of all, I'd say, no matter where you are in the organization, know the business strategy, know how the company makes money, know what the company is looking to achieve, and then consider to yourself, where does my role fit into that? Even if you're very low in the organization, where does my role fit into that? How do I help add value to the end result? Then what I would say is you can take your own role. Okay, even if your company's not doing this, you can take your own role and you yourself can look at the tasks in the role and you can think, what tasks are uniquely human that only I can do? What tasks could be benefiting from the machine, could be augmented by the machine, human plus machine? And then lastly, what tasks here, be honest with yourself, what tasks here would be best when they're automated? You can do that analysis yourself. You can also think through, okay, what skills are needed for all these tasks? What skills are skill adjacent, meaning, what skill is built off of that you could continue to grow in? And you could then start thinking, well, what would development look like? If I have this one skill, but there's a couple of other skills that could build off of that, maybe I can start seeking out on my own further development. And you can do that yourself. You can be empowered to do that yourself. I feel, if you did that work yourself and you put it in a pretty little one pager, your manager's going to love it. It's going to be good news for you, good news for your manager, and good news upwards to show your proactiveness. But that's what I would say at the employee level when you're thinking about how can I upskill, how can I develop? Be methodical, be strategic about it.
Yeah, it's a great advice. And having been a chief people officer myself, people would at different times, like, if my job at risk. And I
Yeah.
think one of the best pieces of advice is always stay relevant, right? If you become stagnant, if you keep doing things the old way, you're going to become the old model on the shelf, and then you are at risk, right?
Yeah.
And you do have to invest in yourself. And I think to Jamie's question, I think organizations are rethinking to what it's going to look like and how do we retool people. And we can go into a whole nother conversations about what the state and what the country needs to be doing because it is going to be different. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think as leaders, one of the most important things for us to remember is we have to lead this change, not
Yeah.
manage the change, lead this change.
It's true. And, one thing I would say is curiosity is such a key, uniquely human capability. I've done a lot of thinking about what it would look like to lead and what are some of those key behaviors that are going to be amplified over time that are uniquely human. Curiosity is a huge one. And what I would say is if you're someone that doesn't feel that you have that natural sense of curiosity, I would not fret. I mean, I truly believe that you can, with discipline, build that over time. And it can start by coming up with a few simple questions that you choose to ask yourself on a regular basis. So, for example, if an initiative comes over to your plate, instead of just thinking through the execution components, you could say, well, how would this initiative work in Asia? How would this initiative work in this other business group? Just to, expanding the practice of curiosity. And that when you do that, it's going to help you become relevant because you're going to be thinking differently and thinking ahead about the work. And I really believe during this time, whether you're leading yourself or you're leading others, that's a truly human capability that is incredibly important, especially in the world of AI. Being curious.
Yeah, I agree. So Nidhi has a question for us. So with AI capabilities still being imagined, what suggestions do you have for CPOs to manage CEO expectations that
Mm.
they need to be at the helm of technology and show value?
Ooh, I love that question. I think one of the biggest challenges for a CPO is figuring out how do you get the full executive team on board. And what's very interesting, as I've been talking with different companies, is I've observed that not all executives are on board. When that occurs, your strategy with AI is simply not going to be successful. Your ability to get adoption is not really going to be successful. People look all the way up to the top. So even if you implement an AI transformational role, if it's a couple level low in the organization, if it does not have an executive seat at the table, it's going to be very hard to have success across the organization because it comes from the top. You can't push it all the way up. So what I would say is, because that's one of the greater challenges, I would work with the CEO and with the executive team to actually think about KPIs. So for the executive leadership team, what's their skin in the game? How are they being measured? What is it? What's in it for them
Yeah.
to live and breathe this new strategy? What's in it for them to make certain that their teams believe in this and follow this? And so, I have reimagined and envisioned myself personally what the future of performance should look like in the now. I've actually created a model. And what I would say related to that is I would look at now in terms of KPIs, AI fluency, AI adoption, in terms of the value that it's bringing. And I would even think about that at the executive level. And if you have a CEO that is not interested in doing that, then that's an answer to you already about if there is a seriousness about transforming the organization with AI. It'll be an uphill battle. And you can probably leverage that with your CEO to think differently about how you're implementing. By the way, it doesn't stop there. If your CEO and your executive team doesn't have that skin in the game, like if they're not responsible to the board on this, or if they themselves don't have their own KPIs, then how do you expect the businesses to adopt? Okay, at the business level, then how do you expect the employees to adopt, right? I've been speaking to organizations and it's very lopsided. Well, this business, we see this appetite and this effort. This other business, it's a little bit more challenging. So I really feel it's a trickle down effect. Again, it goes to the business strategy. You think about the KPIs, but that needs to actually go down to the individual employee level. What are the goals for them? People really pay attention when you pay for performance. They have a KPI now related to the transformation with AI, whatever that is defined by the organization, and it does get attention.
Yeah. I agree. And I'll put it out there. I've been working with some organizations that have actually turned the whole AI on its head and that it's being run by HR.
Mm,
And I've seen where IT has been reorganized and reporting to the CPO.
mm,
That is a significant change. And at first I was like, what? I've been in technology most of my career. I've been a chief people officer. When I thought about it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this makes sense, right? Because for so long, as new technology was rolled out, we were running after, IT and being like, what about the people? Are they trained? Are they okay? How are they going to show up? But now we're flipping the script here. We're
yeah.
really defining what good looks like and how can AI and the tools make
Yes.
it happen.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there's different philosophies on this, and I find it fascinating to dig in. So there's also been this philosophy of, and I think you and I have spoken about it, Kathy, like, oh, perhaps it might make a lot of sense to have an AI transformation business focus reporting into the CEO because there's a lack of bias, right? Whether you're HR or whether you're IT, you don't have a bias when you're thinking about the redesign. But I've had quite a few different conversations. And I have to say, the more conversations that I've had as I've continued to think about this, I do think HR needs to play a very significant role. And part of it is because HR is an expert in the people assets. And you said it yourself, BCG reported only 30% of AI transformation actually has to do with the technology and the tools and the algorithms. 70% is about the people because the people are using the tools and the technology. I mean, I've been through like different technology implementations. And if you start having conversations where the tool is leading the strategy or the initiative, you have a problem. The question shouldn't be like, well, what are the tasks in the tool that's going to make us be able to hit the goal? It should be, what is our point of view? What is our vision? What is our strategy? The tool is a supporting factor to help in that incredible execution. So I think, HR is an expert in talent, in the roles, in performance, in total rewards, how you incentivize people, how you pay people. They also have all the data. I've had really great conversations. One most recently with an AI and workforce design specialist, and we talked about how a CPO may not have the technology expertise, but they'll bring in those partners. And it's crucial because the people are what is going to get the greatest value out of leveraging the technology. It's crucial that you get the people right. And it's essentially the most radical change management exercise that we will ever see. It's an excellent point. And I think HR leaders are really well positioned to play a very valuable role in the future of work.
I agree completely. And I think this is where it goes back to why I've been so passionate around the leadership side and have introduced the E3 leadership code, right? And a human approach to high performance. Express the end vision. Where are we going? Why are we going there? Engage people differently, right? Not everyone's going to engage. You have a ton of fear, uncertainty, and doubt you have to address, but you're going to have to execute as leaders, right? And you're going to have to show progress. But
Mm,
you and I have talked about it quite a bit on this call. It's about building trust and bringing the emotional intelligence. We
yeah.
need leaders now more than ever
Mm,
that are showing up human to
yes.
help in this transformation.
Yes, and I think what I would say, like, empathy is so hugely important, and I think, we've seen a couple of different reports. I think Gartner put out a report, management sentiment is down. There's so much uncertainty and strain on the leadership levels and organizations. So when we think about the future of work, think about it. What is it going to look like to lead and manage? You're going to be managing people and humans that are being augmented by AI, okay? Humans that are managing agents, and then you're going to be managing agents themselves, agents that are managing agents. I mean, my God, right? When you look at that roadmap of potential activity under one leader, which has never necessarily been the structure before, that in itself creates more cognitive load than we ever could have imagined. Because agents, right, like they take a lot of investment of time to train, and then they don't make decisions on their own, and they're not setting the strategy. So you're constantly having to pivot. So the empathy for leadership, the empathy for employees, navigating these changes, trying to do things new, and grappling with different ways of working is truly important. I think, it's important to remember always, no matter the topic, to give everybody grace. But I think we all need to remember, no one knows what they're doing. We're all together. We're all together figuring it out. And I would caution if you find people saying, hey, this is the one way to do it, and I would caution that. Hold yourself in your power and know that everybody is still figuring it out. Hold that power and that sensibility so that you can have that empathy for your peer, for your colleague, for your friend that's trying to figure out what the future will look like, or is struggling with trying to adopt the new tools. We're all in different places. And I think, this time is also, and you and I've talked about this before, Kathy, it's a unique time for us to really focus and discover what truly is uniquely human, what matters, right? In organizations, we talk about what matters in terms of the strategy and the outcomes, and that gives us a sense of purpose as people. That matters to us. We want to add value in the world, and many of us add value in the world through the work that we do that makes us excited to wake up in the morning. Yep. So it gives us an opportunity right now in life to really figure out, how do we do more of that in a way that adds value? But let's be patient with each other, because this is a time where we're all figuring it out.
Yeah, I love it. All right, AnneMarie, you and I know we could talk about this all day. We should have like a full day event on this.
Scratch the surface.
Exactly. But so as a wrap up here, if every leader listening here took one action next week to better prepare for the future of work, what would you tell them to do? One thing.
One thing. Oh my God, I could say so many things. I think what I would say, what I hope everybody walks away with, is a sense of responsibility and urgency to think about the future of work, period. And when I say think about the future of work, I don't mean the tools. To think about what the work could look like, what would be uniquely human, human plus machine, what would be automated, and to ask ourselves, each other, the tough questions, to be honest with ourselves. That's what I would hope people walk away with. And quite frankly, that can translate into many things, like educating yourself, and taking a chance and being brave and asking questions. But I think the biggest takeaway, I hope, is that people feel a sense of responsibility and urgency to think not just about the tools, but a couple steps ahead about the design, so that they all can be a part of shaping it, so it doesn't just happen to all of us.
I love it. Perfect advice. Thank you so much, AnneMarie. And for everyone listening, this hopefully really inspired you to think differently, right? So much we're thinking about the tool, how we can automate things, how we can make things simpler. When you're able to use that tool, the AI, to make your life easier, take more time to be strategic. Take the time to think, to take the responsibility, and imagine a future work that is going to be different. But there's a lot of positive in there. Don't let the fear, ego, uncertainty, and doubt hold you back from what's possible. And if you want to continue this conversation, we're actually having a free webinar, Lunch and Learn. We call them the E3 Lunch and Learns, on Imelda's going to put it in the show notes. I think it is June 23rd, if I got the date right. We'd love to have you there. It's an interactive where we're going to start to break some of these ideas down so you can figure out how best to apply them. Thanks so much, AnneMarie. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have you back, because I know you have a lot more advice to give and helping organizations.
What a pleasure, and I look forward to it and happy to join again.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thank you all for joining, and we will talk to you soon. Have a great weekend.